Chapter 26 The Game and Its Players. Not long after John Pendleton's second visit, Millie Snow called one afternoon. Millie Snow had never before been to the Harrington homestead. She blushed and looked embarrassed when Miss Polly entered the room. I came to inquire for the little girl," she stammered. "You are very kind. She is the same. How is your mother?" replied Miss Polly wearily. "That is what I came to ask you to tell Miss Pollyanna," said the girl breathlessly. "We think it so perfectly awful that the little thing can't ever walk again, after all she's done for mother. You know, teaching her to play the game and all that. And when we heard how now she couldn't play it herself, poor little girl, I'm sure I don't see how she can either in her condition. But we thought if she could only know what she had done for us, that it would help, in her case, about the game, because she could be a little glad." Millie stopped hopelessly, and seemed to be waiting for Miss Polly to speak. Miss Polly had sat politely listening, but with a puzzled questioning in her eyes. When the pause came, she filled it with a quiet, "I don't think I quite understand, Millie. Just what is it that you want me to tell my niece?" "I want you to make her see what she's done for us," answered the girl. "She's seen that mother is different, because she's been there. But I want her to know how different she is, and me too. I've been trying to play the game a little." Miss Polly frowned. She would have asked what Millie meant by this game, but there was no opportunity. Millie was rushing on. "You know, nothing was ever right before, for mother. But now she lets me keep the shades up, and she takes interest in things, how she looks, and her nightdress and all that, and she's actually begun to knit a little baby blankets for hospitals, and she's so glad she can do it. And that was all Miss Pollyanna's doing, 'cause she told mother she could be glad she's got her hands and arms anyway. And that made mother wonder why she didn't do something with her hands and arms, and so she began to knit. And you can't think what a different room it is now, with that red and blue and yellow yarn and the prisms in the window that she gave her. Why, it actually makes you feel better just to go in there now. And before I used to dread it awfully. It was so dark and gloomy, and mother was so unhappy. So we want you to please tell Miss Pollyanna that it's all because of her. And please say we're so glad we know her, that we thought if she knew it, it would make her a little glad that she knew us," said Millie, rising. "Will you tell her?" "Why, of course," said Miss Polly, wondering just how much she could remember to tell. These visits from John Pendleton and Millie Snow were only the first of many, and always there were the messages that puzzled Miss Polly. One day there was a lady named Miss Tarble. "I'm a stranger to you," she began, "but I'm not a stranger to your little niece, Pollyanna. I've been at the hotel all summer, and every day I take long walks for my health. I met your niece on these walks. She's such a dear little girl. I wish I could make you understand what she's been to me. I was very sad when I came up here, and her bright face and cheery ways reminded me of my own little girl that I lost years ago. I was so shocked to hear of the accident. And then when I learned that the poor girl would never walk again, and that she was so unhappy because she couldn't be glad any longer, I just had to come to you. Will you tell her that Mrs. Tarble is glad now? Your niece will know just what I mean. Thank you." And she took her leave. Thoroughly confused, Miss Polly hurried upstairs to Pollyanna's room. "Pollyanna, do you know a Miss Tarble?" "Oh, yes, I love Mrs. Tarble. She's sick and awfully sad. She takes long walks. We go together. We used to." Pollyanna's voice broke, and two big tears rolled down her cheeks. Miss Polly cleared her throat. "Well, she's just been here, dear, and she left a message for you. She said to tell you that Mrs. Tarble is glad now." Pollyanna clapped her hands softly. "Did she say that? Really? Oh, I'm so glad." "But, Pollyanna, what did she mean?" "Why, it's the game, and—" Pollyanna stopped short, her fingers to her lips. "What game?" "Nothing much, Aunt Polly. That is, I can't tell it unless I tell other things that I'm not to speak of." The little girl looked so upset that Miss Polly didn't ask any more questions. Not long after Mrs. Tarbell's visit, a young woman came. She had cheeks that were too pink and hair that was too yellow, and she wore high heels and cheap jewelry. Miss Polly had heard a lot about her, and she was amazed and angry to see her at the Harrington homestead. The woman asked if she might see the little girl, and Miss Polly told the woman that no one was allowed yet to see Pollyanna. The woman hesitated, and then she spoke. "My name is Mrs. Tom Payson. I'm sure you've heard of me. Maybe some of the things you've heard ain't true, but never mind that. I come about the little girl. I heard about the accident, and it broke me all up. Last week I heard how she couldn't never walk again, and I wished I could give her my legs. Maybe you don't know it, but I've seen a good deal of that little girl of yours. We live on the Pendleton Hill Road, and she used to come in and play with my kids and talk to me and my man when he was home. She didn't know that her kind of folks don't generally call on my kind. She did us a lot of good. It's been hard times with us this year in more ways than one, and we was reckoning on getting a divorce, and then came the accident, and we heard about the little girl's never walking again, and we got to thinking how she used to come and sit on our doorstep and play with our kids and laugh. She was always being glad about something, and then one day she told us why, and about the game, you know. I can tell her today that maybe she can be a little glad for us, 'cause we've decided to stick to each other and play the games ourselves. Will you tell her?" "Yes, I will," promised Miss Polly, and then she stepped forward and held out her hand. "And a thank you for coming, Mrs. Payson," she said. Mrs. Payson clutched on her outstretched hand and turned and fled. The door had scarcely closed before Miss Polly was confronting Nancy in the kitchen. "Nancy, will you tell me what this absurd game is that the whole town seems to be babbling about, and what it has to do with my niece to do with it? Why does everybody send word to her that they've been playing it? As near as I can judge, half the town are stopping family quarrels or learning to like something they never liked before, and all because of Pollyanna. Will you tell me what it all means?" To Miss Polly's surprise, Nancy burst into tears. "It seems that ever since last June, when that blessed child was been making the whole town glad, and now they're turning around and trying to make her a little glad too." "Glad of what?" "Just glad. That's the game." Miss Polly actually stamped her foot. "There you go, like all the rest, Nancy. What game?" Nancy looked her mistress squarely in the eye. "It's a game Miss Pollyanna's father learned her to play. She got a pair of crutches once in a missionary barrel when she wanted a doll, and she cried like any child would. And then her father told her that there was something about everything that you could be glad about, and that she could be glad about them crutches." "Glad for crutches?" Miss Polly choked back a sob. She was thinking of the helpless little legs on the bed upstairs. "Yes'm, that's what I said, and Miss Pollyanna said that that's what she said too, but he told her she could be glad, 'cause she didn't need 'em." "Oh!" cried Miss Polly. "And after that she said they made a regular game of finding something in everything to be glad about. They called it the Glad Game. You'd be surprised how cute it works, ma'am," maintained Nancy, with almost the eagerness of Pollyanna herself. "She's made me glad on such a lot of things, and it's made it so much easier. For instance, She's actually made me glad for Monday mornings." "Glad for Monday mornings?" Nancy laughed. "I know it does sound nutty, ma'am. That blessed lamb found out I hated Monday mornings awful, and one day she said to me, 'Well, anyhow, Nancy, I should think you could be gladder on Monday morning than on any other day of the week, because it would be a whole week before you'd have another one.' And I've thought of it every Monday morning since, and it helped. It made me laugh anyhow, every time I thought of it." "And why hasn't she told me the game?" faltered Miss Polly. Nancy hesitated. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, you told her not to speak of her father, so she couldn't tell you. It was her father's game, you see." Miss Polly bit her lip. "She wanted to tell you first off," continued Nancy. "She wanted somebody to play it with, you know. That's why I begun it, so she could have someone." "And these others?" Miss Polly's voice shook. "Oh, almost everybody knows it now, I guess. I'm hearing of it everywhere I go. She told a lot, and they told the rest. And now since she's hurt, everybody feels so bad, especially when they heard how bad she feels 'cause she can't find anything to be glad about. And so they've been coming every day to tell you how glad she's made them, hoping that'll help some. You see, she's always wanted everybody to play the game with her." "Well, I know somebody who will play it now," choked Miss Polly, as she turned and sped through the kitchen doorway. Behind her, Nancy stood staring. "Well, I'll believe anything now," she muttered to herself. A little later, in Pollyanna's room, the nurse left Miss Polly and Pollyanna alone together. "And you've had still another caller today, my dear," announced Miss Polly. "Do you remember Mrs. Payson?" "I reckon I do. She lives on the way to Mr. Pendleton's, and she's got the prettiest little girl and boy. She's awfully nice, and so's her husband, only they don't seem to know how nice each other is. Sometimes they fight, and they're poor, too. But she wears really pretty clothes sometimes, in spite of their being so poor," said Pollyanna. "And she's got perfectly beautiful rings with diamonds and rubies and emeralds. But she says she's got one ring too many, and that she's going to throw it away and get a divorce instead." "What is a divorce, Aunt Polly? I'm afraid it isn't very nice, because she didn't look happy when she talked about it. And she said if she did get it, they wouldn't live there any more, and that Mr. Payson would go way off." "But they aren't going to way off, dear," said Aunt Polly hurriedly. "They're going to stay right there together." "Oh, I'm so glad! Then they'll be there when I go up to see—" "Oh, dear," broke off the little girl. "Aunt Polly, why can't I remember that my legs don't go any more?" There, don't," choked her aunt. "Perhaps you'll drive up sometime. But listen, I haven't told you all that Mrs. Payson said. She wanted me to tell you that they are going to stay together and to play the game, just as you wanted them to." Pollyanna smiled through her wet eyes. "Did they really? Oh, I am glad of that." "Yes, and she said she hoped you'd be, and that's why she told you, to make you glad, Pollyanna." Pollyanna looked up quickly. "Oh, Aunt Polly, do you know about the game?" "Yes, dear." Miss Polly forced her voice to be cheerfully matter of fact. "Nancy told me, and I'm going to play it now, with you." "Oh, Aunt Polly, I'm so glad. You see, I've really wanted you most of anybody all the time." Aunt Polly caught her breath. It was even harder this time to keep her voice steady, but she did it. "Yes, dear, and there are all those others too. Why, Pollyanna, I think all the town is playing that game now with you, and the whole town is wonderfully happier, and all because of one little girl." Pollyanna clapped her hands. "Oh, I'm so glad." she cried, and then a wonderful light lit up her face. Why, Aunt Polly, there isn't something I can be glad about. Or there is something I can be glad about after all. I can be glad I've had my legs anyway, else I couldn't have done that.